Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidil ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Firstly, I would like to thank the brothers and sisters for sparing some time and coming to this course on the Fiqh of Talaaq, on the Fiqh of Divorce. Now there may be some of you thinking that, is this course Fiqh of Talaaq, is it all that? Is there a need to learn about Talaq and divorce in this day and age, and in particular in this country, where, as all of you know, UK law is given precedence over Islamic law. So there may be some of you probably slightly reserved about what we're learning today. Is it really important? Is it that necessary? Now I'll just explain a couple of points. Number one is that all believers, all Muslims, Muslimas, it is paramount, it is necessary that for a person to be a complete believer, he has to believe in Allah and he has to believe in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what I mean by believing in Allah and believing in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that for every situation in our life, for every matter in our life, for every affairs or difficulties in our life, we should ask ourselves, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? What does Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say about this issue, about this particular difficulty? And as we're going to look at throughout the course, that the fiqh of talaq, or the Islamic perspective of talaq and divorce, can actually be practiced, can actually be acted upon in such a way without it contradicting the UK laws. You can actually marry the two. You can actually join the two together. So this kind of notion some brothers or sisters may have or think that, is there any need? Actually, there is a need, because we can actually act upon the two together, and also it is a sign of a true believer that when it comes to difficulties in life, when it comes to situations or matters, we need to ask ourselves whether we can first and foremost act upon the Quran, act upon the Sunnah, and thereafterwards, see whether we can act upon it in such a way whether we are not going to be breaking the laws of this world, of the laws of this particular country. So that's one point. And the second point which I want to mention is that this topic of talaq and divorce, as I was explaining to a brother here, is a very sensitive topic. Not everybody likes to talk about talaq and divorce. In particular, in some families or in some backgrounds where they are a bit superstitious, if you speak to them about talaq and divorce, they say to you, well, you're talking about talaq and divorce, that will mean talaq and divorce is going to happen to you. So some people are a bit superstitious. They don't really like to talk about talaq or divorce because they fear that if they talk about talaq and divorce, it's going to happen to them. And also, as I was explaining to the brother, that because it's so sensitive, people don't like to talk about it. Some brothers are a bit embarrassed, sisters are a bit embarrassed. They don't want to tell others that they find difficulties in their marriage, or that their husbands have given them a talaq, or similarly, men, they find it a bit embarrassing if they were to speak to other brothers and say that I've given my wife talaq and divorce. Especially in the culture or the time we're living in, that where there's like a breakup of a marriage, you are kind of considered to be a loser in society. You're considered, oh, look at that guy, look what he did, he got married, a lavish marriage, 2 years later he's divorced. So you're kind of like looked down upon in society. You're kind of considered to be a loser. There's like a stigma attached to it. So people are very embarrassed to talk about talaq and divorce. And what's happened over time, because it's a very sensitive topic and people are embarrassed to talk about it, that over time various incorrect beliefs, various incorrect notions and rulings have developed on the topic of talaq. And obviously I would like to thank Khadijatul Kubra for giving me the opportunity and the platform for conveying this particular message of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also to eradicate some beliefs and some notions and some kind of incorrect assumptions about talaq and divorce. And hopefully through this particular course, inshallah, we will tackle these problems and we will get rid of these misconceptions and these kind of incorrect notions about talaq and about divorce. Now let's moving along to the slide which we have in front of us. Now there are two main materials which we are going to use for today's lesson, for today's lecture. In front of you, you should have a course handbook, Fiqh of Talaaq, and there should also be some additional A4 plain paper. And I'll request the sisters, I think it should be there near the projector somewhere, some additional A4 paper. The reason why is that sometimes I may give some extra rulings which are not mentioned in the course book. So what you could do is that you can use the A4 plain paper to add the additional rulings on, and then obviously put it inside the course book or stick it on or staple it on later on. So that is the main material which we will be going through, is the course book. And one thing I mentioned is that because it's quite a long course book, and obviously as Brother Tufail was mentioning earlier, that we got 3 prayers, we got lunch in the middle as well. So I'm not going to go over every single line or every single sentence because it just takes too long. So what I'll do is that a particular paragraph or a particular section, I'll explain it in my own words to obviously cut down on the time as well. So that is the first material. The main material is the course book which we have in front of us. Also the second material with some additional rulings and also indicating to some rulings which are mentioned in the course book will be given on the slides which we have in front of you. Okay, so the slides which we have in front of us, inshallah, that will also give some additional rulings which have not been mentioned in the course book, and also indicate to some rulings which are mentioned in more detail with references from Quran and Hadith and Sunnah in the course book. As Brother Tufail was mentioning that questions would not be taken whilst the lesson is going on. Obviously we'll mention that in the slides which are coming up, inshallah. For sisters, if you do have any questions, if you could write on a piece of paper and obviously pass it through the barrier or the dividers which are behind you. Now just a few ground rules or some rules before we start the course. Obviously this is these things have to be mentioned at the beginning so that we can have a nice smooth process, a smooth running of the course. So these, just a few rules at the beginning, some etiquettes regarding students before we inshallah move on to the main part of the talk and the course. Now a couple of things I mentioned on the slide which we have in front of us with regards to number 1, always rectify your intention that this course which we have or which we are participating in, the course which we are doing, it should be done with the intention to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is in general a thumb rule, that whatever we do in life, prayers, giving charity, zakats, going for hajj, it should all be done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So similarly, the knowledge which we are going to be acquiring today, we should know, obviously our main intention is that we're not doing it so that we can go and tell others that I've done a Fiqh of Talaaq course in Birmingham or in Small Heath and gain some popularity or fame from it. Main intention should be to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also the second point at the bottom is that always make dua that the knowledge which we have, we are going to use it for the betterment of our society, betterment for ourselves and also for the betterment of our communities. Because as I was explaining that, there would be, there are some incorrect misconceptions, incorrect notions about talaq and divorce. So our idea, our intention should be that, okay, what we learn today, we will then be able to go and tell our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, our relatives of the true teachings of the Quran and Sunnah when it comes to this particular topic. The next slide, again, these are just some ground rules. This is mainly for the brothers which we have. If you need to ask the teacher a question, then it is respect that you use words such as Sheikh, Ustad, Maulana or teacher. These kind of titles. He's obviously a teacher, and this is just in general, by the way, I'm not referring to myself here, but in general or in any walks of life, anybody who teaches you, you should show some respect to him. Everybody knows the saying of Sayyiduna Ali radhiyallahu anhu, who said that when somebody taught him something, he would consider himself to be the slave of that particular person. Because obviously he's taught you something, he's given you an amazing blessing and a ni'mah. So if you want to take benefit of this particular knowledge, you need to respect your teachers. So when you are addressing the teacher or you want to ask him a question, then words such as, bro or dude, can you ask me, what's the answer here? These kind of words or slang words, we should refrain from. But instead, use words such as Sheikh, Ustad, Maulana, teacher, these kind of words and titles to address the teacher and then ask a question. The next paragraph thereafter, again, another rule is that not to speak or ask any questions whilst the teacher is teaching or whilst the teacher is speaking. So if he's speaking, then to interrupt and just ask him a question, then first and foremost is disrespectful, and also number two, the course will not run smoothly. If I was to take questions, especially from the brothers whilst I'm delivering the talk, the course, it will not actually run smoothly. There will always be gaps and interruptions, and we've got quite a large chunk to do throughout this day. So obviously we won't be able to complete and finish it off. So therefore, no questions, no talking or speaking whilst the teacher is talking. The next point thereafter is any mobile phones to switch it off. Again, it's disrespectful when a teacher is teaching that the mobile phone goes off. So that's one. And also, I mentioned there as well that it's also rude to walk out to answer a phone whilst the teacher is teaching or speaking. So you're just imagine the teacher is kind of delivering a talk or a lecture, and somebody in front of the teacher, there's a phone call has come, just like takes his phone, walks out in front of the teacher. It's very rude, very disrespectful. So just have your phone off. Obviously there may be some brothers and sisters who may have some emergencies, they may need to go somewhere. In the very least, at least have it on silent. But preferably to switch it off so there's no disturbances at all, but at the very least, at least have it on silent. And as I've already mentioned, that questions for the Q&A period. So remember, the Q&A period will be more or less like 5 minutes or so before we break up for that session. So the first session is going to finish at 11:15. So around 11:10 will be the Q&A period, which will obviously coincide with the break as well. The next slide, again, some of the rules. When asking a question, please remember to keep it relevant to the topic. So if you're going to ask a question, then keep it related to talaq and divorce. Because if I'm taking questions which are about, say, salah or about marriage or other things, then there may be some other brothers who've got a really urgent question on talaq and divorce. So if I'm answering questions on salah, then I won't be giving my effort on the topic which is in hand. So remember, question, just keep it relevant to the topic. Now, I do understand that there may be some brothers, they really want to ask some questions about, say, salah, about fasting, about hajj, or about umrah. It's not that, say, for example, easy to find a scholar or an imam where you could actually ask questions. So for those brothers, if you do have any questions which are, or sisters as well, which are off the topic of talaq and divorce, then inshallah during the break, because I'll be here the whole day, so I've got a break during the lunch time or during the coffee break. So if you want to ask me any questions then, which may not be connected to talaq or divorce, then you can ask me during that period. The next bullet point, or the next point, is food is not allowed in the class. Drinking water is allowed. And lastly, I just mentioned that when you are in a gathering of lesson, dars, lectures, then always try to maintain the best adab, the best etiquettes in terms of respect, in terms of humbleness, humility. Ikhlas means sincerity, like you're sincere. So again, there's no personal agenda or motives here. In terms of sometimes what happens is that a person may be delivering a talk or a lecture. Now there may be one or two individuals in the audience, they've just attended the lecture, not to learn, but they want to ask the imam a question at the end to trip him up. They're going to ask him a really difficult question, or they're going to basically shout at him or embarrass him in front of others. So these kind of things, remember, we're not going to really go anywhere in life. Our intention when we are in the lesson or in the lecture is to maintain the best etiquettes, manners, and also sincerity when it comes to acquiring sacred knowledge. Okay. Now we're going to move on now to the Fiqh of Talaaq, and also the course book, and also the topics which we are going to look at. So again, these are some of the topics, and no need for us to go over every single one of them. So these are the topics which we are going to be looking at: when one may or may not divorce. We'll also be looking at who can give talaq in Islam, divorces uttered in anger or insanity, verbal and written divorce, divorce by email or text messaging. On the next slide, it explains. So he explains some things with regards to forced into divorcing, what a wife can do if the husband refuses to divorce her, rules about iddah, waiting period. Also, there will be a topic on decree nisi and decree absolute. Also, custody of children after divorce. So, Islamically, who will be, or who has the right to look after the child? Obviously, after the Zuhur Salah, we will have Maulana Habibullah Sahib, who's also a practicing solicitor, who will give his take on the rules about separation, about divorce, about custody of children from a UK law point of view, and some of the points later about Ila and Zihar, which we'll look at later on. Okay, now let's have a look at the course book. So we're on page 4 now. When one may or may not divorce. So when one may or may not divorce. As I've already explained, I'm not going to go over every single sentence or paragraph in that particular section, but I'll just give you a brief explanation or conclusion of this particular section and paragraph. Now, it is mentioned in the Quran and in the Hadith that every single human being, men, women, boys, girls, have been created with lust and desires. So every one of us, men, also women as well, they have lusts, they have desires, they have cravings. And remember, this lust and desire can never ever go away. It can never ever be eradicated. If somebody was to say to you that I have no lust for women, or if a woman or a sister was to say I have no lust for men, then in reality, or to be blunt, they're lying. They're not telling the truth. Because he's mentioned a hadith of Musnad Ahmad that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, if somebody tells you that a mountain has moved from its spot, these are the words of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if somebody tells you that a mountain has moved from its place or spot, to saddiquhu, believe him. But if somebody says that he has changed his nature, in other words, that he doesn't have any lust or desires, فَلَا تُصَدِّقُوهُ, then do not believe in him. So this hadith is quite clear, telling us that lust, desires, these kind of things are always inherent. It's always going to be there. Somebody says, I don't have lust or desires, literally they're talking nonsense, they're talking garbage. It's always going to be there. So therefore, the Sharia, i.e. Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has given us something amazing, amazing blessings to fulfill this desire, to fulfill this lust, to fulfill this craving, and that is through nikah and through marriage. So through marriage, you build a family, you build a home, you build love, you create love, and also men and women in a lawful way would be fulfilling their desires. Now unfortunately what happens, well, I just mentioned this point, that remember there are three things which a man, and also which couples I should say, need for a marriage to be maintained. There are three factors for marriages to be maintained. I'll just write on the board here for the brothers. Sister probably may need to listen in. Like the first thing which you require for marriages to be maintained is secrets. In other words, husband and wife, they have to be open with each other. If, say for example, husband's doing something wrong, it doesn't have to be like another relationship, but the husband say involved in, I don't know, gambling or drinking, or if the wife is doing some other kind of shady business, whatever, they have to be open with each other to keep that trust. So that's one factor to maintain a marriage. Number two is intimacy. In other words, husband and wife, they have to be intimate with each other, regular intimacy, regular sexual relations, because obviously if a husband and wife are not having sexual relations often, husband will think of another woman, wife may think of another man. So that's the second thing you require for a marriage to be maintained, i.e. intimacy. And the third thing, which is quite a lot of complaints I get sometimes from brothers and sisters, is commitments. Commitments. I.e. sometimes sisters will say, I put 90% in the marriage, husband only puts 10%. A wife will say, look, I do the shopping, I do the household chores, I even work, I pick the kids up from school, I drop them off. Husband doesn't do anything at all, except just sleeping and going out with his friends. So if the wife is putting, say, 90% or 99% commitment and husband only 1%, it may last for 6 months, a year, then there will be a breaking point. Or it could be the other way around, where the husband is putting a lot of commitments in, 60, 70, 80%, but wife is only putting 20%. So these are the three factors you require for a marriage to be maintained. One is they are open with each other. Number two, relations, that there is a regular sexual intimacy between the two. And number three is commitments. And it's only when one of these three factors drop, so it doesn't have to be not there at all, when it drops even. So if one of these three factors drop, or the husband or wife are not maintaining, that's when it may lead towards talaq or divorce or separation. If the husband, say for example, is not having sexual intercourse, and it's been like months and months, he probably will think to himself, you know what, I might as well give divorce and get married to somebody else. As I was explaining about commitments, that if the wife is putting 90% effort into the marriage, husband 10%, wife will probably turn around and think, you know what do I need to stay in this marriage here for? I might as well get married to somebody else who will appreciate me, and vice versa. Similarly, secrets that husband and wife are not open with each other, the husband's open with another woman, or a wife is open with another man, then that will also sometimes lead towards talaq and divorce as well. Now, if it does hit that border where husband and wife are not open with each other, there's lack of intimacy between the two, and also lack of commitments. If it does reach that particular point, then being scholars, or like yourselves, brothers and sisters, being, say, knowledgeable now in this field of talaq and divorce because of the course we're doing, the last mashwara, the last advice you should give is of talaq. That is the last thing. No, that is the last thing. What you should do if somebody comes to you, like a wife or a sister comes to you and complains, oh well, husband's like this, husband's like that, or vice versa, you should try to speak to them. Try to reconcile. Try to mediate between the two. Tell them that, look, or do you know what, I'll speak to your husband. Or do you know what, I'll speak to your wife. Or do you know what, I'll speak to the wife's father. I know him from mosque or whatever. So you try to reconcile. Don't you dare, or don't think about saying, you know what, bro, I think you should divorce her. That's the last thing. You try to maintain the marriage. You get thawab, you get reward in that. It's mentioned in the hadith, Islah bayn al-nas, you get reward, so much reward. So what you do is that, no, you say to the couple, you say to the husband, if he's come to you for advice or mashwara, or if a sister goes to another sister, you tell them, you know what, you need to stick it out, you need to get families involved, reconcile, get back together, even like marriage counseling, even say, you know what, might as well just go for a holiday, umrah somewhere, or go somewhere like an Islamic place for a couple of weeks or so, and hopefully through the barakah of visiting the Baytullah and visiting Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there may be some barakah in your marriage. You give them those kind of advice. Now it's only when they've tried everything, when they've tried everything, they've been umrah, they've been hajj, they've been counseling, they've been everywhere, parents, families have tried to reconcile, but it's still zero, nothing's happening. Only then the husband and wife, or you as an individual, may give advice to someone, okay, that, alright, maybe a good opportunity now, or you may need to think about talaq and divorce. So that in a nutshell, how talaq laws and rules come about. First and foremost, we try best to maintain the marriage as much as possible. But after we've tried, the husband has tried, the wife has tried, other people have got involved and they've tried to keep the marriage together, only then right at the end you will think about talaq and divorce. But then at the same time, the Sharia has also said that the Sharia has also said, as we can see from the slide in front of us, that in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is the worst of all halal and lawful acts. So it is lawful and permissible, but out of all the lawful acts, halal acts, out of all the permissible acts, the worst in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving divorce. So just think about that, especially brothers who may be married, or sisters who may be thinking of a separation or a khula or something. That think about it, like ask yourselves, have you done all these things? Have you tried your best to maintain the marriage? Have you tried your best to do that? Have you tried your best to do this? And it's only when you've tried everything and nothing has worked out, then you may think of a talaq or a separation. If you have a look at the first page 4 on the handouts, or on the not handouts, the course book, I've also mentioned a couple of reasons why it should be one should think about it, or one should think twice before talaq or divorce. If you have a look at the last two paragraphs of the first section, it explains that it causes separation and breakup between two families, especially if children are involved. And also, if you look at the next part, he explains it often leaves a bitter taste for all to bear. Because what normally happens, again, sometimes with speaking to brothers about it, that if a father, just say he's got a young child, but he decided to divorce his wife, so now he goes and gets married to somebody else. But that child who grows up, he grows up and he has this totally bitter resentment of his father. Literally hates his father. Because, he'll have, sometimes the mother also kind of tells him, look what your father did. He left you when you were 2 years old, or he left you when he was 3 years old. So that child who now grows up, he grows up with all anger inside him. Obviously, he kind of maintains it and controls it, but there's always that anger there, which is, as potentially dangerous because it can be unleashed anytime. But there's always the anger there that, oh, this is what he did to me when I was a young child. He left me and my mother. And there's always that bitter resentment to the father. So it's something which is, it causes a lot of problems. Divorce and talaq, especially if children are involved. Obviously, it breaks up families as well. And as everybody knows, the hadith that breaking ties or connection is considered to be a sin in Islam. So because of these reasons, that's why the Sharia has said that, look, think about it, think twice, think 3 times, do mashwara with the scholars, the imams, with your friends, with your colleagues and so on, and then at the end think about giving talaq and giving divorce. Okay, now the next section which we are going to look at on the next slide is talaq, or giving talaq or divorce is the right of a man. So talaq and divorce is the right of a man. In other words, only men can give their wives talaq and divorce. Okay, so if there is a kind of talk of separation, or just say, for example, if they want to divorce or separate, then the husband has the ace, he could say. He could decide when I want to give divorce or talaq to the wife. So it's the husband's control. The husband has the right to give talaq and divorce. Now obviously we're going to look at it later on in the course book that women can also initiate a separation as well, but we'll touch on it later. But just generally speaking, it's the husbands who can give talaq and give divorce to their wives. And I've mentioned a verse in the course book, and I've just mentioned one verse there, but there's actually many verses where it quite clearly talks about men having the right to divorce their wives. Understand that some of the sisters we have are from a madrasa, so obviously there are many examples where إِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ. So those who study in a madrasa, who know a bit of Arabic, who know that طَلَّقْتُم is referring to men. It's a word or a pronoun which is attributed to men. So therefore Allah says وَإِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ, that when the men decide to divorce their women. So these kind of verses, there's quite a few of them. I've just mentioned one in the course book, but there's quite a few, actually 5 to 7 over the Quran, where we can find that the right of giving divorce is to a man, and only he can use that particular right. Now I'll just ask a question to the brothers. Why do you think that men are allowed to, or why do men have a right to divorce their wives? Anyone? What do you reckon? I don't want to say, otherwise I'll get pelted from the other side. You say. Okay.
Because of the responsibility.
Yeah, you could say responsibility. Yeah, it's actually mentioned in a hadith. It's a very famous hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, where the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has described women to be, in Arabic we call them naqisatu aqlin. Okay. Naqisatu aqlin, which means that women compared to men tend to be a bit more emotional and tend to be a bit more prone and haste and quick fire when it comes to making decisions. Now this hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said it in terms of looking at it from a general point of view. Generally speaking, women tend to be emotional and also they tend to be a bit more prone and haste when it comes to decision making. Generally speaking, because there are many women, I'm sure, who are actually who are not emotional, who actually think over things before they make a decision. And I'm sure there are many men who are actually emotional and also they are also very haste and very quick fire when it comes to decision. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said it, generally speaking, that men, they tend to be more, or they tend to look at things, they tend to ponder over things before they make a decision, compared to women, again, generally speaking, who tend to be haste and a bit prone and a bit quick fire when it comes to decision making. So because of that reason, because of these two factors, the Sharia has given talaq, or the right of talaq, to husbands, because they would be able to ponder over the situation, they would be able to think about the consequences more. I'm not saying that women don't think about it, they do, but I'm saying generally speaking, because of that reason, men have the right to divorce their wives. Now, just one point here, obviously you could use the additional sheet if you want to add this on. Regarding this hadith, as you know, a lot of non-practicing Muslims and also many non-Muslims always ask this question that, where is the equality here between men and women? They look at this hadith and they say, well, look, Islam doesn't give rights to women, because they just call them naqisatu aqlin. In other words, they call them stupid, they're calling them silly, they're calling them foolish. So how do we interpret this particular hadith? Now the way we interpret this particular hadith, and this is where a lot of people make mistakes here, listen carefully, is that Islam is not a religion of equality. Islam is not a religion of equality, it is a religion of justice. The two are different. Islam is not a religion of equality, it's a religion of justice. Because if we were to say, and this is where a lot of people get stuck here, because they pointed out that Islam is a religion of equality. So then that gives the meaning that, okay, men lead the prayer, women should lead the prayer. But that's what equality means, that it's same for everyone. Men are giving azan, women should be giving azan. If men are delivering khutbahs and speeches and sermons, women should also be doing the same as well. If you're going to explain that Islam is a religion of equality, then you're trying to say that men lead the prayers, women should lead the prayers again. But Islam isn't a religion of equality, it's actually a religion of justice. And what does justice mean? It means that Islam recognizes that men, their strengths, their weaknesses, and Islam recognizes women, their strengths and their weaknesses. And accordingly, it gives the rules. So Islam recognizes that, okay, men are a bit more stronger, so hence they should be the leaders of the community. Women, generally speaking, tend to be a bit more emotional, hence they should not be the leaders of communities, but they are more like a supporting role for the husbands. So Islam is a religion of justice, which means that they recognize the two, recognize the weaknesses, the strength of a husband, of a man, of a woman, and then gives rules accordingly. That's what justice means. Whereas if you're going to portray This is what happens sometimes with non-Muslims when people try to explain this hadith. They give the meaning, oh well, Islam is a religion of equality, but then when this hadith comes, they get stuck, because this hadith doesn't talk about equality, does it? So remember, we never say Islam is a religion of equality, because that will then mean everyone's equal, and we don't actually say that. We say Islam is a religion of justice, insaf, adl, which means that we recognize the weaknesses, the strengths of every individual, and we give rules accordingly. Okay, moving along to the next slide and also the next section of your course book, we're now on page 5, is with regards to the different types of talaq and divorce. This is more like fiqh based here. This is more like jurisprudence based. What we mentioned in the previous slide was more like wisdoms and theory. This is more into the fiqh side, the jurisprudence side. The different types of talaq and divorce. Now, in a nutshell, there are 3 types or categories of talaq and divorce. The first one is called talaq ahsan, Arabic word ahsan, which means very good. So the first category is called talaq ahsan. Now, what does talaq ahsan mean? So talaq ahsan is where a husband gives his wife one talaq, one divorce, in the period of purity, in where no intercourse has taken place. It then goes on to explain, he then leaves her without giving her another talaq or divorce until the expiry of the period of iddah. Okay, now that definition, that is the best I could do in terms of word-wise, in terms of putting it down on a piece of paper. But I understand that definition sounds difficult, or is probably be thinking, what on earth has Mufti Sahib written there? I'll just explain it for the benefit of the brothers on the board, the whiteboard which we have in front of us. Obviously, sisters will have to listen in. Now, I'll just give you an example. Just say for argument's sake, first 6 days of the month is a woman's periods. A woman, she has a menstruation cycle, she has a period. Just say for argument's sake, she has it for every 6 days of the month. So December the 1st to December the 6th is what we call the periods, menses. Okay. Then from December the 7th all the way until the end of the month, December the 31st, is what we call the period of purity. The period of purity. So just explain that again. So the first 6 days of the month, December 1st to December the 6th. Similarly, the next month, January the 1st to January the 6th. The month thereafter, February the 1st to February the 6th, is what we call the haze, the menses. And the remaining 24 days or 25 days is the period of purity. In other words, she's clean, no menstruation, bleeding. She prays the salah. If it happens to be, say, fasting Ramadan, she does her roza, she does her fasting, no problems. Now, going back to the word talaq ahsan and the type of talaq which is being referred to here, is where the husband gives his wife one talaq in the period of purity. In other words, from December the 7th to December the 31st, during that period, when his wife is clean, she's not on her menses, she's praying salah, she's fasting, during that period, during those 24 days, 7 to the 31st, husband gives his wife one talaq, one divorce. Okay, so he says to his wife, I have given you a divorce. And what's also key as well is that during those 24 days, there has been no intercourse. So there's a couple of things here. He gives his wife just one talaq during the cleanliness period. And then in that cleanliness period, he has also not had intercourse as well. Now, let me just ask this question to the brothers. Why do you think not having intercourse is actually very important?
Because it can affect your emotional state.
Yeah.
Affect the park at the time.
No, during the 24 days when he could have had intercourse. Anybody, any ideas? Yeah, basically the reason why no intercourse is important is because if he did have intercourse and he gave her a talaq and a divorce, then what could happen is that that intercourse could lead to the woman falling pregnant, which will then obviously increase her waiting period to 9 months, as we're going to look at later. So that's the factor there. So that's why it's important that, the period when you are giving the talaq, it has to be a cleanliness period, and also there's been no intercourse in that particular cleanliness period. Okay? Then he goes on to explain that he then leaves her without giving her another talaq until the expiry of the period of iddah. Now again, I need to explain this again. When a woman is divorced by her husband, she has what we call a waiting period. She has a waiting period which she has to observe before she can marry someone else again. Obviously, waiting period rules are coming up later on in the course. So she has to observe a waiting period. And a waiting period, I'll just explain it now so that we are able to understand this rule in front of us. The waiting period, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, for a woman is 3 menstruation cycles. When 3 menstruation cycle passes, then she's now out of the bonds of nikah and marriage, and she's now able to marry whoever she wants. So 3 menstruation cycles. So let's have a look at this scenario here in front of us. This woman has already gone through the menses for December, the periods for December. December the 1st to December the 6th were her periods. So she's already gone through that. Now from December the 7th to December the 31st, just say for argument's sake, on December the 10th, husband has issued a talaq, one divorce to his wife. He hasn't had intercourse with her. What will that mean now is this wife would have to wait for 3 more menstruation cycles before she's now completely out of the marriage and she's now able or allowed to marry somebody else. So if the husband has given his wife talaq on December the 10th, so the first menstruation cycle would be, what would it be, roughly?
January.
Yeah, January, good. So January 1st to January 6th will be the first menstruation cycle. The second one will be February the 1st to February the 6th, and the third one will be March the 1st to March the 6th. So basically on March the 6th, that woman now will be out of the marriage. Yeah. So basically she'll have to wait 3 menstruation cycles, which in other words kind of works out to be 3 months, but it depends. Some women have menstruation cycles quite often, so for them it could be say 1.5 months even, or 2 months, and they will be out of the bonds of nikah and marriage. But generally speaking, it will be 3 months. So basically in a nutshell, this talaq ahsan is, husband gives his wife 1 talaq, 1 divorce, no intercourse during that period, and he just leaves her until the March the 6th, when her 3rd and final menstruation period expires, and then he just leaves her. She goes a separate way, he goes his separate way, and they're out of marriage and nikah. Obviously we'll look at later on in the course, just say for argument's sake, husband wants to get back together again. It could happen, he's divorced his wife, the menstruation cycle finishes, but he wants to get back with his wife again. What does he do? So we'll touch on that later on. Okay, we'll touch on that, what he can do in that situation. Okay, everybody okay with that? Yep. Obviously, inshallah, I'll take questions later on in the before the session finishes. Okay, the second type of talaq is called talaq hasan. So one is ahsan, which means very, very good. So that is the best way. So if anybody or husbands are thinking of divorcing, then this is the best way to do it. You only give them 1 divorce, by the way, not 3, because 3 is considered to be disliked. We're going to come back to it later. But you only give 1 talaq and 1 divorce. No intercourse during that period. Let her pass the 3 menstruation cycles, and then you can go your separate ways. The next category of talaq, which is okay, hasan means that it's good, but it's okay, it's sufficient. Probably best not to, but it's okay, there's nothing wrong with it. And that is called talaq hasan. Now if we just have a look at the course book which we have in front of us, talaq hasan is where the husband gives his wife 3 talaqs over 3 separate periods of purity, in where no intercourse has taken place. So a husband has given his wife 3 talaqs, but over 3 separate periods of purity, i.e. cleanliness, where no intercourse has taken place. Now again, just for the brothers, of the sisters, probably we need to listen into this. I'm just going to explain it on the board which we have in front of us about how this second type of talaq works. Now again, we use the same example of December the 1st to December the 6th. So just say a woman's periods are for 6 days, from December the 1st to December the 6th. What's happened on December the 10th? I'm just going to go over the facts or the scenarios. So December the 10th, husband gives his wife 1 divorce, 1 talaq. So we're going to look at it later how he can give talaq. He could say verbally, he can write it to her. He's given her 1 divorce, 1 talaq. Now this woman, this sister, her next menstruation cycle is January the 1st to January the 6th. So January the 1st to January 6th is her next menstruation cycle. As soon as she passes that, just say again, January the 10th. So on January the 10th, he gives the second talaq, the second divorce. Okay, second divorce. Again, during these periods of cleanliness, no intercourse there. December the 1st, he issues the first talaq. January the 10th, he issues the second talaq. This woman then goes over her second menstruation cycle from February the 1st to February the 6th. Then on February the 10th, he gives his wife the third talaq. gives his wife the third talaq. And then on March the 1st to March the 6th, soon as she passes the third menstruation cycle, she's gone, like she's out of the marriage. Okay? So that's what talaq hasan is. That basically, over the 3 periods of tuhur or purity, the husband in each purity gives his wife 1 talaq. In the second period, he gives her a second talaq, and in the third period, he gives his wife a third talaq. Everybody happy with that? Yeah, so basically, again, for the benefit of the sisters this time, I'll just go over the dates again so you're probably aware of how Talaq Hasan is working. So December the 1st to December 6th, just imagine, is the period or menses of that particular sister. On December the 10th, when she's now clean, pure, she's able to pray salah, fast, so on and so forth, husband issues her with 1 talaq. Then on January the 1st to January 6th, the sister goes for her second menstruation cycle. And then on January the 10th, the husband issues her with her second talaq, a second divorce. And then on February the 1st to February 6th, she goes over her her second menstruation cycle. Husband gives her a third talaq on February the 10th. And then March the 1st to March the 6th, where she finishes her third menstruation cycle, she's now out of the nikah, out of the marriage. So that's why the second category is called Talaq Hasan. Now just a question to the brothers here. Why do you think this category is called Hasan, good? And the first category we read was Hasan, very good. What's the main difference you can identify between the two categories, which has obviously led to one being called very good and the one being called just good? What's the main difference?
In Talaq Hasan, you say talaq 3 times?
3 times, yeah. So that's the main difference here, because we're going to look at it in the third section that you shouldn't really give your wives 3 talaqs. You know, when there may be some brothers who are married here, but some of you may not be. If you are going to divorce her, you should just give her 1. And I explain the reasons later. Because if you give her 1, you can still get back together. Even though she's separated, you can still get back together, but you just have to redo the marriage. But if you give her 3, whether it's in one go or whether like this, then there's no way of you to getting back together again unless she goes through halal, which we'll touch on later. But it's always good to just give 1. You know, so you kind of like, there's always that option there, that window there, that okay, in the future, right, you may not like her now, but you never know, later on Allah may put, you know, love for her in your heart later on, or vice versa. So you may then decide to take her back. So it's always good to just give her 1, because when you look at it, 1 does the same thing, doesn't it? After the 3 menstruation cycle, the marriage breaks. So you could do the job with 1. So there's no point of you giving 3, and then there's no way of you guys getting back together again. Just like 1 would be sufficient. Okay, so that's why scholars have said the first one to be Ahsan, very good, and the second one to be Hasan, which is good, does the job, but it's preferable not to. Okay, now let's move on to the third. Let's move on to the third category of talaq, which is called talaq bid'ah. Bid'ah, yeah. Also known as talaq haram as well, which means the unlawful talaq. And basically, talaq bid'ah is to either give 2 talaqs or 3 talaqs in one period of purity. Yeah, so basically, in one go, he gives his wife 2 talaqs or 3 talaqs, or he gives, like say for example, 3 talaqs in one go or in one sentence, they all come under Talaq-e-Bid'ah. So basically, in other words, Talaq-e-Bid'ah is where a husband gives his wife 3 talaqs in one go, just to make it simple, or 2 in one go, or 2 or 3 in one period. So one period meaning, like, just say the wife or the woman or the sister, her menses were from December the 1st to December the 6th. So on, just say December the 10th, he gives his wife 1 talaq. December the 20th, he gives his wife a 2nd talaq. December the 30th, he gives his wife a 3rd talaq. So to give 3 talaqs in one period of purity, or to give 3 in one go, or 2 in one go, all that comes under Talaq-e-Bid'ah. All that comes under Talaq-e-Bid'ah. Inshallah, we have more paper here, brothers, if you need any more extra paper. If you need anything extra. Okay. So they call Talaq-e-Bid'ah. Okay, now one point I want to mention about this one, you could either jot it down on the extra paper we have provided you on the actual course book itself, is, and I'll mention some hadiths about it later, is 3 talaqs is something which you shouldn't give. It's haram, it's unlawful. To give your wife 3 talaqs in one go, it's something which is unlawful and haram. But the question which arises, generally speaking, is it still effective? Is it still effective? In other words, it's haram to give 3 talaqs to your wife, but if a husband did give his wife 3 talaqs, is it going to be done? So the answer, and we're also going to be looking at some hadiths later on, is yes. That 3 talaqs given in one go would be effected. In other words, talaq will be done. So 3 talaqs in one go would be effected and would be done. Now, somebody may be thinking, well, it's haram. Yeah, now to give 3 talaqs in one go, it's haram, it's unlawful. How can something unlawful and haram be effected? Now, I'll give you an example. Killing someone is unlawful and haram. Yep. But when you pull the trigger and you kill someone, it's effective. In other words, it's done. The consequences happen. That guy's dead. You now go through the consequences. Taking drugs is haram. But when somebody takes it, sniffs it, and it kind of intoxicates him, the consequences are done. So what I'm trying to say is that 3 talaqs, it's haram to give, but when a husband utters it, it's done. The same way to kill someone is haram, but when that killer, when he kind of like aims at that person with a revolver or with a shotgun, and he pulls the trigger, the bullet comes out and he kills that person, it's haram what he did, but the consequences are done, isn't it? So exactly as well, 3 talaqs is haram, but when it is done, when it is said, anti talikun, or husband says to you are divorced, or these kind of words, then it will be done and it will be effective. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Obviously we'll look at it a bit more later, but it's like a simple way to answer people who say, something which is haram, how can it be done? So as I just gave an example, like there's so many things which are haram, but the consequences are done. Zina, adultery is haram, people still commit zina. Taking drugs is haram, people take drugs. Gambling is haram, but people still do it and the consequences take place. So exactly as well that 3 talaqs, 3 divorces are haram, but when it is uttered or said, then the consequences will take place and will happen. Okay, now this then takes us on to the next section or the next slide on your handbook, which is on page 5, and the next slide is who can give talaq in Islam. In other words, what are the conditions Obviously, we mentioned husbands can give talaq, but what are the conditions for talaq to take place, or for talaq or for divorce to happen? What are the conditions? Now it's mentioned there that the husband should be sane. Okay, so the husband, he should be sane for the talaq and for the divorce to happen. The husband should be sane. In other words, he's not mad, he's not insane. Now I'm going to explain a couple of rulings here, which the brothers and sisters could jot down on the extra piece of paper which we have provided you, is about doubts in talaq, or doubts in giving talaq, or misgivings about talaq, or about divorce. Now, unfortunately, what has happened is over the past few years in particular, there's been a rise in OCD. A lot of people, men, women, they suffer from OCDs, which is a really bad bout of doubts and misgivings. In other words, they do wuzu and they're always doubting, have I washed my arms properly? So they washed it 10 times, but they're still doubting, have I washed it properly? So they're like there washing their arms 20 times, 30 times. And then they wash their face. They washed it 20 times already, but they're still doubting, have I washed my face? So they wash it another 20 times. So OCDs and these kind of doubts and misgivings, we call it in our culture, in our language, waswasas. So a lot of people are suffering from doubts, men in particular, women also. Now what happens that sometimes these OCDs lead to people having doubts about, have I said talaq, have I said divorce, have I given talaq to my wife? And if anybody, like, obviously some of you may know someone, but sometimes it could be really on very, very small words. They just doubt that they've given the wife talaq and divorce, and they get really panicky. And the only time they feel a bit better is when they speak to a scholar, and sometimes a Maulana isn't enough for them. They need to speak to someone like a mufti, someone a bit more authority. So when they speak to him and the mufti sahib says, oh no, right, talaq hasn't occurred, then they feel a bit more better. But for some, it's really bad that one mufti's words they don't take. They want to get 5, 6 opinions. So they get 5, 6 opinions from different scholars, then they feel a bit better. Now, as I was saying, that sometimes it could happen is that they may have just said to their wives that, okay, just an example, I don't know, just say husband and wife, they're going somewhere, they're going for a trip. So the husband says to the wife, oh, can you quickly pack your bags? We're going to miss the plane, or we're going to miss the coach or the train. So then what happened? The husband just said, can we quickly pack your bags? So he's saying it in terms of, yeah, let's quickly get ready for the safar and the journey. But then when he said the words, quickly pack your bags, there's now doubt in his mind that, okay, have I said talaq to her? Quickly pack your bags. In other words, pack your bags and go, get out the marriage. So then that thought then plays in his mind. Okay, I think I've said talaq, I said divorce to her, I've separated from her, and then he's in a panicky state until he gets confirmation that no, it's okay, divorce hasn't occurred. Okay, and it could be some kind of like innocuous words, like he just said out, something like that, out, I'm just going out, or can you just go out? And then from that word out, he's playing in his mind, divorce, 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 divorce. Okay, so I think now the question which I wanted to obviously the brothers and sisters to jot down is the husband should be sane, but if the husband has these kind of misgivings or doubts about talaq or OCDs of talaq, so if the person's got OCD or he's got doubts about talaq, misgivings about talaq, waswasas about talaq, whispers of talaq. Now, sometimes there may be some word they're reading. It could be something like, something that could be so like innocuous, something like Sirat al-Mustaqim, they're reading in Salah. So they said Tol, and then from that word it plays in the mind, or did I just say Sirat Talaq Mustaqim or something like that? So these kind of misgivings or waswasas or whispers of doubt, in a nutshell, talaq or divorce doesn't occur. Okay, because as you can see, they're not really stably, mentally sane, are they? They're probably doing other kind of jobs. They may be like, company directors and so on, but mentally, stably, they're not there. Yes, stably, they're not there. So their talaqs will not occur. So, brothers, if you know anyone who's like always doubting, have I given my wife talaq and so on, you just need to reassure them that don't worry, no talaq has occurred. You don't have to worry about anything. Just kind of like reassure them that you're okay, because the condition for talaq to occur is that one has to be sane, and because you are not sane, then in that situation talaq would not occur. Okay. Also, it's mentioned that the person has to have reached the age of maturity for talaq to occur. Okay, so there's two things. One is the husband has to be sane, and also number two, he has to be mature, baligh, for talaq to occur. These are the two main conditions for talaq to occur in Islam.